Great pleasure to introduce His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Alkholifey, who is the Governor of the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority.
Greetings from Riyadh. It is my pleasure to be with you today at the Economic Summit of the Singapore FinTech Festival. I'd like to begin by thanking Mr. Ravi Menon, the Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, for the invitation to summarize the G20 finance track work under the Saudi Arabian Presidency, which was concluded 2 weeks ago with the Leaders Summit. As a presidency, we made realizing opportunities of the 21st century for all the overarching G20 theme for 2020. With our partners in the G20, we reached an agreement on an inclusive and action-oriented agenda that rested on 3 pillars: empowering people, safeguarding the planet, and shaping new frontiers. Our finance track agenda related essentially to the first and third of these pillars. Let me start off with the first pillar, empowering the people. A core link between empowering people and the financial sector exists in the form of financial inclusion. Our aim was to lay out ways to advance financial inclusion for 3 specific groups, and to assess in particular how financial technology can help in this respect. These 3 groups are young people, women, and the small and medium enterprises, the young and small entrepreneurs, if you like. The reasons why we wanted to focus on better financial inclusion for these particular groups are fairly straightforward. Although progress has been made to advance financial inclusion of the world's young people, almost half of them are still financially excluded. To make further progress, innovative strategies are needed, to which fintech and digital financial services providers can make an important contribution by delivering more convenient, faster, secure, and flexible products with lower fees. At the same time, the public sector needs to provide appropriate safeguards for youth to access these new financial products. The same reasoning holds even stronger for women, whose participation in the economy and in the financial sector is even less advanced. Indeed, since 2011, there has been a persistent gender gap of 7 percentage points in financial inclusion levels. For what concerns SMEs, we know that they are important engines of innovation, job creation, investments, and economic growth. However, access to finance is frequently cited by them as an entry and a growth barrier. Also, for this group, innovative digital financing can contribute further to reducing their financing gap. Our focus on these 3 groups became even more relevant after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and its economic fallout. Indeed, the economic consequences of the pandemic are likely to increase existing inequalities and therefore weigh more on the vulnerable groups in society, among which the young people and women. Furthermore, although the pandemic is having a profound impact on business activity and employment in all countries generally, it is likely to have a disproportionate effect on SMEs. Their financing constraints are typically exacerbated during economic downturns, especially during crises. In response to our agenda focus, the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, or the GPFI, this year zoomed in on harnessing digital and innovative technologies to boost the financial well-being of youth, women, and SMEs. The outcome of its work has been a set of G20 high-level guidelines on digital financial inclusion for these targeted groups. These guidelines set out practical featured policy options that could be applied to targeted financial inclusion gaps for youth, women, and SMEs through digital financial services. Separate reports for each of these targeted groups underlie these guidelines. Let me now move on from the first pillar, empowering people, to the third pillar, shaping new frontiers of our G20 agenda. Under this third pillar, we were intent on adopting bold strategies to utilize and share the benefits of technological innovation, especially in the G20 finance track work, while also mitigating emerging risks and challenges. Accordingly, we steered activities in the direction of the following three dimensions. First, facilitating innovation in technology-enabled regulatory and supervisory solution, the RegTech and SupTech. Second, exploring the entry of big tech in emerging markets and developing economies. And third, delivering a roadmap to enhancing global cross-border payments. Also in this domain, the choice of our focus on the benefits of digitalization across the economy turned out to be extremely relevant. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic has reinforced the importance of technological innovation in the financial sector. As the world came to a halt due to the necessary containment measures put in place to protect this and save lives, the use of digital technology became a critical channel for accessing even the most basic financial services and maintaining economic activity around the world. This growing digitalization is transforming the landscape for both regulators and the regulated entities. In this context, the Saudi G20 presidency oversaw the delivery of a report by the FSP on the use of supervisory and regulatory technology by authorities and regulated institutions. This report emphasizes the potential to improve oversight and analytical capabilities for regulators as well as financial institutions. To complement this work, the G20 presidency under the Saudi presidency worked closely with the Bank for International Settlement Innovation Hub's Singapore Center on organizing the first ever virtual G20 Tech Sprint initiative. It brought together global figures to discuss actionable approaches and technological solutions to widespread challenges for further incorporating data and technology in the financial system. We are very pleased to have worked alongside our global partners on this initiative, and even more pleased that the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors welcomed the initiative and recognized the work on the responsible innovation in their October communique. Under the same heading of the growing digitalization, the G20 also asks the FSP to explore the motives of large technology firms, so-called big tech, for venturing into emerging and developing economy markets. It is important to note that there are many opportunities that can be realized from the entry of big tech into emerging market and developing economies markets, such as increasing the efficiency of financial provision, providing cheaper and more inclusive financial services, and enhancing the ability to improve consumer welfare and financial stability. Nonetheless, we recognize the need to be vigilant of emerging risks as the role of the big tech in the financial sector expands. As regulators and supervisors, we need to operate proactively to contain these risks, but must do so in a manner that does not stifle innovation in the finance industry. On the contrary, the public sector should aim to promote financial innovation. One such area where the Saudi G20 presidency saw clear room for action concerns cross-border payments. It has been well documented that there are significant challenges with cross-border payments. These include high cost, slow speed, limited access, and transparency, as well as various frictions like adherence to compliance requirements, lack of interoperability, and outdated technology platforms. Following a call from the Saudi presidency, the G20 therefore asked the FSP, in coordination with the newly formed Cross-Border Payments Coordination Group, along with international organizations, and standard-setting bodies to develop a roadmap for enhancing cross-border payment arrangements globally. The roadmap was completed in 3 stages. Stage 1 comprised an assessment of existing arrangements, including challenges and frictions. Stage 2 targeted the development of building blocks aimed at improving global cross-border payment arrangements. And Stage 3 on actions and milestones to pave the way forward. 19 programs called building blocks were identified to address the challenges, issues, and frictions that may exist. These 19 building blocks are brought together in a cross-border payments enhancement roadmap, which sets out a high-level plan and timelines to implement the agreed actions under each building block. The roadmap is a very ambitious, multi-year, multi-dimensional program, which requires significant collaboration. It will also involve considerable consultation and engagement with the private sector. I am delighted to note the G20 endorsed this roadmap at the October meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. Before concluding this overview of the main highlights under the Saudi G20 presidency agenda with regard to the financial sector, I need to point out that it is not only the role of the presidency to guide work on topics which it deems of particular interest and which are globally relevant. An effective presidency also has 2 other important duties to undertake. First, it must ensure that the ongoing multi-year agenda of work of the G20 on other financial sector topics continue to advance. Second, it must stand ready to enable the global community to respond adequately to unforeseen developments that will impact the financial sector. With regard to the first of these 2 duties, keeping the multi-annual agenda work on track, let me very briefly highlight the 3 dimensions where the Saudi presidency was especially active. First, on the transition away from the LIBOR. Second, on cybersecurity. And third, on the so-called stable coins. For lack of time, I cannot go deeper into these matters, but I would like to highlight a couple of important contributions to the assessment of risks related to technological innovation in the financial sector. On the so-called stablecoin arrangements, the FSP, the FATF, and the IMF delivered important work to the G20 this year. The G20 also endorsed high-level recommendations to address the regulatory, supervisory, and oversight challenges raised by the so-called global stablecoin arrangements, which were developed by the FSB. To keep pace with the evolution of these innovative products, the G20 furthermore asked the FSB to review its recommendations on a regular basis in order to ensure they remain relevant and continue to promote effective regulation, supervision, and oversight of the so-called stablecoin arrangements across jurisdictions. Technology advancement in the financial sector has also introduced a new set of cyber risks that may potentially impact not only financial stability, but also national security. As regulators and supervisors, we need to act proactively in this domain by scaling up cyber practices to combat the evolving cyber risks. In this perspective, the G20 welcomed the FSB toolkit of effective practices for cyber incident response and recovery. The second duty of the G20 presidency, which I mentioned earlier, concerns its role as agile organizer of the collaborative response to global unforeseen challenges. The global financial crisis in 2008 was a classical case. The COVID-19 crisis in 2020 presents another type of case. It is fair to say that COVID-19 has surprised all of us in terms of its transmission speed and its economic and financial impact. It called for quick and decisive actions on the part of the authorities, nationally as well as internationally, including at the level of the G20. A strong action plan to support the global economy through the pandemic was agreed upon in April, and it continues to serve as a living document so as to keep our approach to the pandemic and its impact dynamic and relevant. It contains an important part on international support to countries in need, but it also reflects a number of commitments to maintain stable financial conditions for strong recovery and to increase the resilience of our infrastructure against future risks. In conclusion, I can state that I am proud that we, as Saudi presidency, were able to achieve so much from our priorities, while at the same time advancing the G20 multi-annual agenda, notwithstanding having to deal with the worst economic crisis of the past 90 years. With an eye on the next agenda item of your economic summit today, which will cover a discussion of the 2021 G20 agenda, I would like to wish our Italian colleagues all the best for their presidency in the coming 12 months. Thank you for your attention.